This lecture may be injurious to your sentiments. It may incur rational sense in you. Watch at your own discretion. Your sentiments are not my liability. Hello, this is Hrisikesh, and you are welcome to my channel, Hrisikesh Lectures. Education is quintessential for any civilization to sustain its civil sense. Observing the calamitous condition of the education system and realizing the urgency to spread education as far as one can, I have started to lecture on YouTube. As far as authenticity is concerned, I have a first-class master's degree in English literature and I am UGC NET qualified. My lectures are long and detailed as a real classroom lecture should be. Also, most of my lectures are available on YouTube Music as podcasts. And if you like the way I try to educate, consider liking, sharing and subscribing to the channel so that the algorithm gets it to more and more students of literature. With all this being said, let's begin today's lecture. Dear audience, often we speak about love in a way as if it is a land long explored, the map of which is known to us all. Looking at others, we often comment, "This is not love, that is how love should be," and so on. Yet, if we are to try to define the feeling of love or the expression of love, we shall find no conclusive answer. When we comment on the romantic relationships around us, we comment based on our feelings about them and forget to study them from their perspectives. We declare, "This is infatuation, that is toxicity, he is so possessive, she is so passive-aggressive," and so on. And we are not always incorrect. But the problem is that there is no absolute correctness to be found that can be accepted by all of us. Love is felt and expressed differently by different people, and that's why it cannot be bound in the sphere of one definition. So, some of us may not believe in using the word love at all, while the rest may try to use it too often. With all this in mind, dear students, let us study a few of Robert Browning's poems to understand how human behavior varies from person to person in the feeling and the expression of love, or the absence of it. We shall study a series of poems by Browning, one by one. As of this moment, I am thinking of lecturing on My Last Duchess, Porphyria's Lover, The Last Ride Together, Andrea del Sarto, Fra Lippo Lippi, and the Bishop orders his tomb at St. Praxis Church. But it will all depend on how much you are interested in them. Throughout the series, I shall explain the poems all around. But the common thread that reads all these poems is the theme of love. And to explain that will be my primary focus. Let us first have a little bit of introduction to the poet, Robert Browning. Robert Browning was an English poet of the Victorian era. Born in 1812, he had little formal education, but being a voracious reader, he became a scholar. Influenced by the writings of Shelley, he began to write poetry at a very young age. Browning has often been criticized for being obscure as a poet, but there's a treasure in his poetry that makes him one of the greatest poets ever. As William J. Long writes, "He is not an entertaining poet. One cannot read him after dinner or when settled in a comfortable easy chair. One must sit up and think and be alert when he reads Browning. If we accept these conditions, we shall probably find that Browning is the most stimulating poet in our language." The greatest legacy of Browning lies in his use of dramatic monologue. Let's just pause here for a moment. What is a dramatic monologue? Let us understand the term first. What does a dramatic monologue do? How does this form do it? And why is it necessary to do so? In other words, what is the significance of dramatic monologue as a form? Let us understand that before we carry on our introduction to Browning. When a poem becomes dramatic in its effect, by presenting itself in the form of a monologue, it becomes a dramatic monologue. Now, what is dramatic and what is a monologue? Something is dramatic when there is a character present in front of us, dealing with a particular situation, and our attention is focused towards the character. We are interested to see how this particular character is going to act or react in that given situation. We judge the character and the situation as we see them, instead of relying on a narrative put forward by a narrator. The more crucial the situation is, the more we get interested. And having to see how a certain character is behaving in that situation, we begin to feel a lot of things, such as how the character is as a person: intelligent, moral, courageous, indecisive, evil, etc. We also, most of the time, try to imagine how we would have acted or reacted in a similar situation. Engaging us thusly, making us feel in this manner, is what we call the dramatic effect. So, we can easily say that in a dramatic monologue, there will be at least a character and a situation, and it is not about the feelings of the poet. So it is not a lyric poem. Now, what is a monologue? A monologue is when there is only one person who speaks in front of one or more silent listeners. It must be noted that a monologue is not to be confused with a soliloquy, an aside, or a dialogue. In a soliloquy, the speaker is alone on stage, where technically he is not speaking but thinking out loud. Nobody can hear him except the audience. In an aside, the speaker's voice is not heard by the other characters present on stage. And lastly, in a dialogue, more than one characters talk to each other. A monologue is where there is one speaker and one or more silent listeners. Combining the concepts of what is dramatic and what is monologue, we get the concept of dramatic monologue, which is emphatically called dramatic for another reason also. It is a form of poetry and not of drama. And that's why it is explicitly named dramatic, meaning like a drama. We never call a soliloquy a dramatic soliloquy, do we? Because we know that a soliloquy takes place in a drama, and so it is inherently dramatic. On the other hand, a dramatic monologue is, unexpectedly, poetry giving a dramatic effect instead of the expected poetic effect. And so, we call it a dramatic monologue instead of just a monologue or even a poetic monologue. Now, what does this form do and how? A dramatic monologue presents in front of us a character in a very specific and significant situation of life. In that specific situation, that character speaks to a silent audience, fully aware of the fact that he is being judged on the basis of his speech. So, in contrast to a soliloquy, where the character's true self comes in front of us since no other character is there to listen, here, in a monologue, the speaker is actually actually trying to make an impression in the minds of his listeners. The difference is just like between what we are when alone and what we are in front of others. Whenever there is an observer present, it's not about what I actually am, but how I want to present myself in front of that observer. Don't we all relate to it? All human communication is filtered in this way. And yet we judge each other despite every one of us trying to make an impression. Isn't it so? So, the speaker of the dramatic monologue is aware of the fact that the silent listeners are to judge him and evaluate his character from their perspectives. And yet, he has to speak what he wants to speak in a manner that also prevents any impression that he doesn't want to make. Exactly what we do in real life. For example, I want to tell you that I like you, but I want to make an impression instead of just being bluntly honest. That's the way of the world, isn't it? So, why do we need this form? What is the significance of this form? Through this one monologue set in one situation, an entire character is established. We get to see what kind of situation is around him. That tells us a lot about society and life itself within that society. And we get to see how the character feels about, acts in, or reacts to that particular situation. It tells us about human psychology. We get to see how the situation affects the character and how the character affects the situation. We get to see how he sees himself and how he projects himself to be seen. Of course, there is a gap between what he actually is and what he thinks of himself. There may be a gap between how he thinks of himself and how he wants his listeners to think of himself. Lastly, there is a gap between how he wants his audience to see him and how his audience, as well as we as readers, see him actually. Just like we try to analyze, understand, and judge real characters in real life, so we have to do with the speaker of a dramatic monologue. Thus, a dramatic monologue can be the study of a certain society, a certain relationship, or a certain philosophy. But most importantly, it is a study of the human mind. Now let us get back to Browning again. Dramatic monologue, as a form, was not invented by Browning, but it was perfected and popularized by him. Maria Frawley writes, "The form is especially interesting in the way it reflects an emerging understanding of the nature of identity. Browning gravitated to disturbed psyches, and in poems included in Dramatic Lyric 1842 and Men and Women 1855, readers are invited to reckon with their hidden histories, sordid secrets, and immoral thoughts." For example, if we look at one of his earliest works, Porphyria's Lover, written in 1836, we see how a first-person speaker can tell a surprisingly vivid story of love and violence. My Last Duchess, written in 1842, probably the most widely known of Browning's poems, is also a tale of love and violence. Some of Browning's characters are historical figures and some are from his imagination. But all these characters present different nuances of the human psyche. And Browning teaches us in a very engaging way using the form of dramatic monologue. As Ronald Carter and John McRae write, Browning's dramatic monologues enable him to explore extreme and usually extremely morbid states of mind. But his use of different characters and a range of different voices does not allow the reader to identify the speaker with Browning the author. To critically evaluate Browning's place as a poet in the history of English literature, he is often contrasted with Alfred Tennyson, the most reputed poet of the Victorian age. As William J. Long points out, in one respect, at least, these poets are in perfect accord. Each finds in love the supreme purpose and meaning of life. In other respects, especially in their methods of approaching the truth, the two are the exact opposites. Tennyson is first the artist and then the teacher. But with Browning, the message is always the important thing, and he is careless, too careless of the form in which it is expressed. Again, Tennyson is under the influence of the Romantic Revival and chooses his subjects daintily, but Browning takes calmly and ugly subjects with equal pleasure and aims to show that truth lies hidden in both the evil and the good. Browning wrote much but revised too little, and perhaps that's why his poetry is often criticized as obscure, meaning not easily understandable. His flight of thought took him from one idea to another too fast, and he didn't have the time to perfect what had been composed already. Even so, his influence among the modernists was phenomenal. He had a prolific career starting from Pauline in 1833 until Asolando in 1889, published on the day of his death. In terms of popularity, he was always eclipsed by the unassailable popularity of Tennyson in his lifetime. But once came the wave of modernism. Browning shone brighter than ever. If Tennyson was considered the greatest poet of the Victorian era in his lifetime, Browning has proven to be superior since. According to critic Hugh Walker, there is no 19th century poet of the first rank whose ultimate position is so doubtful as Browning's. He is at once astonishingly great and astonishingly faulty. But according to Arthur Symons, if the best poetry is that which reproduces the most of life, his place is among the great poets of the world. All these facts are available in any book on the history of English literature. What I am interested in is Browning as a lover. Browning met Elizabeth Barrett in 1845. Elizabeth was a poetess and Robert was her admirer. So communication began through letters, admiring each other as poets. They fell in love. The following information is from what we can try to learn a lot. Elizabeth was 6 years older than him, but he loved her. Elizabeth was a popular and successful poet at that time. Browning was not. Yet there was no Abhiman, ego, and he loved her. Elizabeth had been suffering from frail health since she was young, and she was to suffer throughout her life, and yet he loved her. In their 20 months of courtship, the couple exchanged 575 letters, nearly a letter each day on average. Her father did not like such a turbulent passion, and so they eloped and married in 1846. Elizabeth's father disowned her, so there was no monetary prospect in that marriage, but there was love. That's what mattered to them. In a patriarchal society where the commodification of human beings, the popular image of the angry young man without manners, Blackmail and dowry are prevalent as daily issues, except being superseded by our unscrupulous indifference. We may perhaps learn some basic things from this couple, if not from their poems. They stayed in Italy, far away from the English society, far away from their readers. They lived happily for 15 years, and only after Elizabeth died in 1861, Robert Browning returned to England. He never remarried. Such a character is rare gem in the real world. I don't know whether the idea of love is just an illusion like the idea of God. But when I read about Robert Browning for the very first time, I knew for sure that the man was a lover in the most serious sense of the word. And it is astonishing to see how much this man, who was so successful, so passionate, and so indisputably loyal in his love, could have such unfathomable insight on various kinds of love, especially the failed ones. We shall try to dive deep into what he has taught us about love in the upcoming lectures of the series, and I hope you'll enjoy them. So that's it for today. I hope to get your attention again in the upcoming lecture, and it seems you have watched till the end. Would you like to spread the lecture to more learners? All you have to do is to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.